It is early morning, and before the chores begin, I see my older brother stop in the middle of the barn, looking around as though he came there for something, but cannot remember what it was. At first it seems like nothing because all of us little things now and then, but over the years I have learned that some small changes deserve a second look, especially after 60. Before you keep watching, I want to be clear about something. I am not a doctor, and this video is not meant to diagnose dementia or replace medical advice. If memory changes worry you or someone you love, speak with your doctor. What I want to share is something much simpler. How careful families learn to notice long before anyone speaks the word dementia, so they could pay attention sooner instead of later. My name's Ezekiel, I'm Amish, and my family has cared for one another this same plain way since we settled Lancaster County in 1838. The old way of noticing changes in the mind had two parts to it, and you cannot skip the first part, because that is the part everybody skips. First, you learn to notice the little changes. Then you understand what they may be trying to tell you. In this video, I'll walk you through 10 early dementia symptoms that many people over 60 mistake for normal aging, one simple step at a time, so you know what to watch for
before those small changes become bigger ones. Here is the plain truth families rarely hear until it is already late. Every single one of us forgets a name now and then, misplaces the keys, or blanks on a word mid-sentence. That is simply what a mind does as the years pile up, and it is nothing to fret over by itself.
The trouble is, because ordinary forgetfulness is so common, families often wave off the early, real signs as nothing more than that, right up until a change becomes too large to explain away. My own grandmother used to say that watching for trouble in a loved one's mind is like watching for a storm on the horizon. You do not wait for the rain to already be falling on your head before you notice the clouds gathering.
The 10 signs I am about to walk through are not meant to frighten you. They are meant to help you tell the difference between a cloud passing by and a real storm building, so you know when it is time to sit down with a doctor rather than simply hope it passes on its own.
The first sign is memory loss that actually gets in the way of daily living, not simple forgetfulness. Forgetting a name for a moment and remembering it later that same afternoon is ordinary. Asking the same question 3 or 4 times within a single conversation, or needing to be reminded of the same appointment over and over every single week is a different matter entirely.
My brother asked me the same question about the weather twice within 20 minutes that morning in the barn, and it was not the words themselves that troubled me. It was that he did not seem to remember having asked at all, not even a flicker of recognition on his face when I answered him the second time. That is the real line to watch for, not the occasional slip everybody has, but a pattern of needing to be told the same thing again and again, as though the information simply will not stay, slipping away as fast as it arrives, no matter how plainly it was given.
The second sign shows up in a person's ability to plan or work through a problem they once handled with ease. This might look like struggling to follow a recipe they have cooked their whole life, or losing track partway through balancing a checkbook they have kept for decades without trouble.
It often takes them far longer than it used to, and their concentration seems to slip halfway through, leaving a task unfinished that they would have completed without a second thought only a year or 2 before. Esther's own aunt began setting aside her quilting patterns, ones she had followed for 40 years.
Because she could no longer keep track of where she was in the sequence, growing frustrated in a way that was unlike her, snapping at small mistakes she once would have laughed off. A little extra time needed here and there as we age is common. Losing the thread of something familiar entirely, again and again, is worth a second look.
The third sign is difficulty finishing tasks that have long been second nature. This is not learning something brand new and struggling with it. That is expected of anybody, young or old. This is forgetting the steps of a chore done thousands of times before, like harnessing a horse, or forgetting how to get to a place driven to for 30 years without a single wrong turn.
My brother took a wrong path toward the barn that same week, a walk he has made every single morning of his life since he was a boy, before the sun was even fully up. It was only a moment, and he corrected himself quickly, shaking his head at himself. But it was the kind of moment that stays with a person, because the barn was never a place that required thinking about at all. His feet had always simply known the way.
The fourth sign is confusion
confusion about time or place, losing track of the day, the season, or where they currently are. This goes further than forgetting what day of the week it is, which happens to plenty of us on an ordinary Monday when the days have all run together.
It looks like genuine confusion about how much time has passed, believing a season has changed when it has not, mistaking morning for evening, or growing confused about how they arrived somewhere and how to get back from it. A neighbor of ours once found her husband standing in their own field at dusk.
Unsure for a moment which direction led back to the house he had lived in for 50 years, turning in a slow circle, as though the fences and the fence posts had rearranged themselves overnight. That kind of disorientation in a place a person knows better than any other is not something to explain away as simply being tired.
The fifth sign involves changes in how a person sees and judges the world around them, not their eyesight itself, but how the mind makes sense of what the eyes take in. This can show up as trouble judging distance, misreading contrast between colors, or difficulty reading words on a page that used to come easily and now seem to swim or blur together.
Some folks even struggle to recognize their own reflection for a brief moment, mistaking themselves for a stranger in the room, a small, unsettling thing that most families never think to mention to a doctor because it seems too strange to be real. This is different from cataracts or the usual dimming of eyesight most of us experience with age, which a family doctor or eye doctor can check plainly and often correct. This sign is about the mind's understanding of what it sees, not the eyes themselves, and it is easy to miss unless you know to look for it.
The sixth sign is new trouble with words, in speaking or in writing. That goes beyond the occasional words slipping a person's mind. It might look like stopping mid-sentence with no idea how to continue, struggling to name an object they have called by the same name their whole life, or substituting the wrong word entirely, calling a chair a table without noticing the mistake, or calling a grandchild by the wrong name and not correcting themselves when told.
Nearly everybody loses a word here and there, especially when tired or distracted by a busy day. This sign is about how often it happens and whether it seems to be growing more frequent as the months pass, rather than staying the same rare slip it always was. The kind that used to happen once in a while and now happens several times in a single conversation.
The seventh sign is misplacing items in ways that go beyond ordinary carelessness and struggling to work backward to find them again. We all set something down and forget where, only to retrace our steps and find it minutes later without much trouble at all.
This sign looks different. Items turning up in places that make no sense at all. A pocket knife left in the icebox. Spectacles found tucked inside a boot with no memory whatsoever of how they got there or why they would have put them somewhere so unlikely in the first place.
Sometimes this sign comes paired with suspicion, a person insisting someone else must have moved the item, unable to accept they placed it there themselves. When a person can no longer walk back through their own recent steps to find what is lost, and it happens again and again, that pattern is worth mentioning to a doctor.
The eighth sign is a real change in judgment, particularly around money or personal care. This might look like a normally careful person giving away large sums to a stranger at the door without a second thought, falling for a scam a sharper version of themselves would have seen through in an instant, or growing careless about grooming and hygiene in a way entirely unlike them, going days without a proper wash when they were always particular about such things before.
Every person makes the occasional poor decision. That is simply part of being human, and none of us are careful every single day of our lives. This sign is about a pattern, a person who was once cautious and sharp about such things, suddenly making choices that seem unlike who they have always been, over and over, without seeming to notice anything unusual about it themselves, and without the embarrassment such a mistake would have caused them in years past.
The ninth sign is pulling back from activities, hobbies, or company that a person once enjoyed without hesitation. This can look like skipping the Sunday singing they never used to miss, or losing interest in a woodworking hobby hobby kept up for 30 years, often because they sense something is different and feel embarrassed or unsure around others as a result.
Worried they might forget a name or lose their place mid-conversation in front of people they have known their whole lives. Everybody grows tired of certain things now and then. That is ordinary. And a quiet season here and there is nothing to worry over by itself.
This sign shows itself as a steady pulling away from nearly everything a person once looked forward to, a quiet retreat that family members sometimes only notice once it has gone on for some while, once the empty chair at the singing has become simply expected rather than remarked upon.
The 10th and final sign is a real shift in mood or personality. A person becoming confused, suspicious, fearful, or easily upset in situations that never troubled them before. This might look like sudden irritation when a routine changes even slightly, an outburst over something small that would never have bothered them a year ago.
Or new suspicion toward family members who have never given them reason for it, accusing a spouse of hiding things or a child of stealing from them. All of us have a bad day now and then, short-tempered or out of sorts for no clear reason, and that alone is nothing to be alarmed by. This sign is about a lasting shift. A person who was even-tempered their whole life suddenly becoming someone who seems unsettled or fearful far more often than they ever were before, in ways that do not simply pass with a good night's rest or an apology the next morning.
Now, here is the part that matters most, and it is not one of the 10 signs at all. Noticing one of these things, even more than one, does not mean a person has dementia. Plenty of these signs can come from poor sleep, worry, certain medications, a vitamin deficiency, or simply having a difficult week.
What noticing them does mean is that it is time to pay closer attention and to have an honest conversation with a doctor sooner rather than later. Early attention gives a family more options, more time to plan, and more chances to understand what is actually happening, instead of waiting until the signs are too large to explain away as anything else.
There are treatable causes of confusion that have nothing to do with dementia at all, and only a proper doctor's visit can tell the difference between those and something more lasting. Watching close and loving a patient does not mean staying silent. It means caring enough to ask the hard question while there is still plenty of time to act on the answer. I sat with my brother that same evening after chores and told him plainly what I had noticed, gentle, without alarm in my voice, the way you would tell a neighbor his fence had a weak post before it fell over on its own. He admitted he had noticed some of it himself, quietly, and had been hoping nobody else had, carrying that worry alone for longer than he ever let on.
We agreed together, calm and without fear, that he would see his doctor before the month was out, and I offered to drive him myself if that would make it easier for him to go. I do not know yet what that visit will show, and I will not pretend to you that I do.
What I do know is that noticing early and speaking up with love instead of staying silent out of worry gave my brother and our whole family more time to face whatever comes next together, rather than being caught unprepared by something that had already been quietly building for a while, unnoticed by anyone willing to name it out loud. I want to say this one more time plainly, because it matters more than anything else in this video. I am not a doctor. These 10 signs are not a diagnosis, and only a real physician can tell you or your loved one what is truly happening. If you noticed even one or two of these signs in yourself or someone you love while watching, please do not carry that worry alone, and please do not wait for it to grow into something harder to ignore.
Speak to a doctor, gentle and without shame, the same way I sat down with my own brother, because early honesty, however uncomfortable it feels in the moment, is always kinder than silence in the long run. If this kind of plain, careful watching over the ones we love is something you find useful, stay a while longer here. On the channel, we walk through things like this with care, often one plain lesson at a time. Until next time, may you notice the people you love a little closer, and may you never be afraid to ask the hard question while there is still time for a good answer.